Okay, so we'll go ahead and begin, as we normally do, for those who want to recite the Namo Tassa and Three Refuges. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Saranang Gacchami. Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami. Dutiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. Dutiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. Tatiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami. Tatiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. Tatiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. So welcome out, everybody out there in the virtual space to this Sunday program. And today's talk, you might say, is going to be a kind of a culmination of the last number of talks and Sutta studies that I've been giving on the dependent origination and the practice of meditation, and learning how to slow down that wheel of becoming, and how to develop the moment-to-moment awareness, the moment-to-moment attention to the the six senses coming and going, to the five aggregates coming and going. And last week, the Dhamma talk was about that moment-to-moment process, or moment-to-moment rebirth, moment-to-moment birth and death of the mental process. And because that is according to the Vipassana meditation system and the system of developing insight knowledges, it is tuning in to that moment-to-moment birth and death, or arising and vanishing of the different sensory impingements of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and then the various feelings, thoughts, perceptions, reactions that are occurring over and over. And that is the real, the deepest level of the Paticca Samuppada. And I want to talk about, what happens when that wheel of birth and death gets suspended, which occurs at the time of stream entry and other moments of the path. Knowledge and those what lies between the birth and death of the ego consciousness. And, that is called the deathless state. Now, we read in a previous sutta, the Dhamma Chakka Pavatana Sutta, turning of the wheel of the Dhamma, where the Buddha had said that open is the door to the deathless. And the Buddha was beating the deathless drum. it means to awaken people to that state of the deathless. In the Pali language, that's called the Amata Dhamma. So basically, the deathless state is the unconditioned state. It's the eternal, original, pure Dhamma that was never born and never dies. And there's some similes that the Buddha gave for that. The Buddha gave a talk to the monks. This was in the Udana. Monks, there is this unconditioned, this unborn, undying, deathless element. Because if there weren't this unborn, undying, deathless element, there would not be a release from the rounds of rebirth. There would not be a release from the conditioned, the born, the dying, and what is subject to death. But because there is a release from the born, the dying, the aging and death, because he discovered it in that experience of Nibbana, therefore there is this unconditioned, unborn, undying, deathless element, or basically the eternal Dhamma. And also another statement in another sutta, a monk came to him and asked him, where is it that the four elements of earth, fire, water, and air are no longer born and die, or no longer exist? And the Buddha said, there is this realm where the four elements do not find a footing, do not find a foothold in the conditioned existence. And that is the Nibbana element. Now, I want to talk about another verse that's one of my sort of favorite verses. And it talks about the practice of heedfulness or mindfulness. And mindfulness is the path to the deathless. Unmindfulness is the path to death. The mindful do not die. The unmindful are as if dead already. So understanding this excellence of mindfulness, the wise person dwells therein, enjoying the bliss beyond birth and death. And that bliss beyond birth and death can occur here and now, while a person is still living. And I want to explore that, the meaning of that verse a little more. But also, I wanted to talk about the two levels of Nibbana, called the Nibbana with the five aggregates still remaining, and the Nibbana without the five aggregates. And so this generally refers to when a person attains enlightenment, and a person could attain arahantship or even the Buddha, when they're 40 years old or a certain age, and continue living another many years, 30, 40, 50 years, but their mind is experiencing Nibbana. But that is called Nibbana with the aggregates remaining, because they still have their physical body and they still have the sixfold sense sphere. But the difference is they do not have craving, grasping, clinging, and becoming. They no longer are creating or making new karma that would be the fuel for any more rebirth. So the Nibbana with the 5 aggregates remaining refers to the person who's still living. But their mind has been released and freed from greed, hatred, and delusion, and the ego-centered type of consciousness. Now, the Nibbana without the aggregates, I suppose it's probably fairly obvious, is when that person dies. When the Buddha died or when an Arahant dies, actually, you don't refer to a Buddha or an Arahant saying they died. Normally in the Pali language, they refer to it as they attained the Pari-Nibbana or complete Nibbana when they left the last body. And, the mind, the 5 aggregates disbanded and they don't come together again to form another life. Now, in Sri Lanka, maybe some other countries, or people who, hear about Nibbana because they're used to other terminology, let's say, Christian terminology of heaven or hell or something like that. And or they think that Nibbana is a place that you go to after death. But that's not true. It's not even a place where the mind goes to after death. And so to say that one is going to Nibbana, that's not correct. I mean, technically. Correct. And there's a little simile that I use sometimes to describe that state, even of Nibbana, even while you're still living, but because it's very hard to grasp. Nibbana is really hard to tell what it is, and that's why usually it's spoken about in terms of what it isn't. It isn't form, feeling, perception, volition, consciousness. It isn't any of the, the 4 elements or anything in between or so on. So it's kind of difficult to understand. But let's say you have a jar with a lid, and you have a jar, you fill it with water, and you put the lid on the jar tightly, and then you place that jar in a lake, and then you can say, well, the water in the lake is different than the water in the jar, but they're both water. And what is separating the water in the jar from the water in the lake? Well, it's being separated by the glass of the jar and the lid. So in this analogy, the glass jar would represent our physical meat, bone body, 4-element body. And the lid would be like our mind. Then let's say you hold that jar under the water and you unscrew the lid. Then that water goes out into the lake. Now, can you say, give me my water back? Where is my water? Can you now identify that water that was in the jar? No. But you also can't say that water doesn't exist, because now it is, been dispersed throughout the whole lake. So you can't say the water doesn't exist. That's why these various ascetics that I talked about in some sutta came to the Buddha and asked him, does the Buddha exist after death or not? And he said no to each case. He doesn't exist and he doesn't not exist. Or does he both not exist and exist? But none of those things applied to the mind of a Buddha or an Arahant when they pass away. And really, Nibbana is a state of awareness, is the unconditioned, awareness, or the, universal life principle, or whatever a person might want to call it. But one should understand that, the differences between some other types of ideas about it. And this is also connected with, there's four, the four stages of enlightenment, right? So we talked about the first stage of enlightenment and the 10 fetters. So with the stream entry, a person destroys 3 fetters. With once returning, they weaken 2 more fetters and then finally eliminate them with never returning. And then the last 5 subtle fetters are eliminated with the Arahant stage. So these are those 4 stages. It's the liberation of the mind from greed, hatred, and delusion, which is a heavy weight. So there's another simile that I like to use to kind of describe this, just to kind of give some idea. So let's imagine that a man or you or anybody was carrying 4 50-pound sacks of concrete, 2 on each shoulder. So you have 2 50-pound bags of concrete on one shoulder, 2 50-pound bags of concrete on another shoulder. It'd be very heavy. And you'd be, stumped over and straining. So that is carrying the full weight of the 10 fetters when the mind is shackled by those 10 fetters by greed, hatred, and delusion. So when you reach the first level where personality, belief, attachment to rites and rituals, and doubts are overcome, that's like somebody come by and push one of those bags of concrete off your shoulder. Now, you would feel noticeably lighter, although it would still be a weight, but it would be noticeably lighter. So that is the experience of a Sotapanna. When those 3 of those 10 fetters have been overcome, the lightness of the mind is not so obsessed and worried and preoccupied with thoughts of I, me, and worry and fear. He still has them to some extent, but not so much. And, greed and hatred. And then the second stage is like somebody comes by and pushes off another bag. And then you would feel even that much. In the third stage, a person comes by and pushes off a third bag. And then finally, at the stage of the Arahant, the last bag is pushed off the shoulders, and then you would feel, freed from that weight. So that is the experience. If a person reaches those levels, that experience of that lightness of the mind that's freed from, the normal types of guilt, worry, fear, remorse, doubts, confusion, and the whole gamut of, thoughts and so on. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that and to stress that, Nibbana is a state of the mind, even while one is still living. And so I want to come back to this phrase that I mentioned before, that mindfulness is the path to the deathless. Unmindfulness is the path to death. The mindful do not die. The unmindful are as if dead already. So this mindfulness is the path to the deathless. So we were mentioning that already, the deathless. It's the path to the deathless. So, if you're going to go somewhere, you take a road, right? And once you reach a certain city, you may get off that road and just walk around in the city. You reach the road. So we practice mindfulness, and of course, all the other steps of the Eightfold Path to liberate the mind from, the hindrances and the fetters. And unmindfulness is the path to death. So this is the crucial. Most people, before they practice Dhamma, they're unmindful. And so mindfulness is really, that state of constant alertness where the mind is grounded in the present moment and is aware of the subtle contacts and the subtle vibrations that are arising. Because, the mind is tied into the nervous system of the body. And anytime the sense organs are touched by any of those sense objects, those vibrations go through the nervous system. But most people, they are not able to feel those initial contacts. And because their mind is dull, or it's slow, or it's got the hindrances, or it's preoccupied, so they don't really see those moments of contact. So, and therefore we do unmindful actions, and we are still taking things for the self. And so another meaning of that is that when we cling to an object, we basically kill the object. See, since the baby was born, basically the baby's born without any concepts or ideas in the mind, but it gradually accumulates those through our learning language, of course, and how our parents and so teach us. So we see everything as an object that, as I've already mentioned many times over in the other times, that our mind has formed its likes and dislikes towards all these various sense stimulus. And ever since we were a baby, we were experiencing things, and they're being remembered as these things cause unpleasant feeling or painful feeling. I don't like them. These other things create a pleasant feeling, and I like them. So this is recreated every moment we see another similar object. So we're living in the past. We're living in the past. We don't see anything with fresh eyes. Because that's how quickly the nervous system reacts to things. And whenever you call an object, this is a man, this is a woman, this is a watch, or this is anything, basically you limit its usefulness. You could say you kill it because you are just seeing it as a static object, not as seeing it all of its other potential uses and so on. Now, sometimes, of course, that is good, but other times it's sort of limiting. So when we're unmindful, basically we're seeing the object as being some kind of permanent object in time and space, and we get attached to it, or we react to it in one way or another, and basically we kill the aliveness of the mind, because then the mind gets dragged into the past and the future projection, and we don't see the aliveness of that moment. So that's one meaning of the unmindfulness is the path to death. That every time we get attached to an object, we kill it. We limit it. Like, especially this is true with like relationships, when, people get too possessive in a relationship, you're killing the other person's freedom by wanting to hold them in the past the way you first met them, right? You're not allowing them to change. So you want a person to stay the same forever, because the mind is pigeonholing them in a certain way. So basically, it's like you're killing that object, and that's the reason why there's so many broken relationships, because of this kind of possessive attitude to the other person or friend. And when you start to expect them to act or be in a certain way, but because of the nature of change, they are changing. So when the mind isn't floating in the present moment and free in the present moment and not to cling to the objects, then we are experiencing that freedom of the mind. So, and even at the time of death, the time of death is very important, because as I mentioned last week, as we just in this stanza, the mindful do not die. So why are people afraid of death? Because they're afraid that they're going to die. And either it's the fear of the unknown, or it's the fear of losing the only thing that they know. Because the only thing that we know are these objects of the world, of the material world, the only thing that we've known. So when you develop the practice of mindfulness, and you especially tuning in to that moment to moment birth and death, and when you've been able to cultivate the 5 spiritual faculties, that means faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, and the 7 factors of enlightenment, when you're seeing that moment to moment arising and vanishing of the flow of impermanence, but without any clinging, and that builds up to a tremendous speed. Normally our mind is very slow in its perceptions. So really the skill in vipassana is to allow the speed of perception, of noticing the different moments, the revolutions of the paticca samuppada, or simply just different moments of seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, hearing, thinking, arising and vanishing one after another. When there's no clinging, then the past and future kind of dissolve. And I've already talked about this in other talks about meditation, that the past and future is created simply by the clinging of the mind. And so by speeding up the rate of perception, where you no longer have time to bring in the past or future towards any of the 6 sense objects, including our own thoughts, then the mind, comes to the present moment. And basically that revolution of the paticca samuppada gets suspended. And that process of birth and death, stops, even if it's just momentarily. And that is the profound insight into, anatta, no self, and the person can enter the stream at that point, if it's the first time that they've had this experience. So the training is that we try to develop our mindfulness so that even if one is dying, then if you can hold the mind in that state of present moment awareness and without any clinging, then the mind can be liberated. And I think I mentioned in some suttas that there are a number of suttas in which monks had actually attained enlightenment at that time of death by being able to let go of any type of perceptions from the unconscious that arise. But if you can't do it while you're still alive, that's in meditation, then there's very likelihood that you're going to do it, be able to do it when you're laying on the deathbed, trying to watch your thoughts there. So anyway, that's, that. So as I mentioned before, you don't really die. Death is kind of basically an illusion for the ego. And so one learn to die before you die, or for the ego death before the physical death. That's, ultimately when in the practice of Dhamma to overcome the suffering. Anyway, there's a lot that could be said more about that. And actually in this, the next sutta class, I'm going to be going over some more suttas, short suttas. Actually, I'm going to be reading some material from a book that I put together. It's called The Way to Peace and Happiness. This book is out of print. It was first published back in the 80s in Sri Lanka. But it's a collection of suttas, extracts from suttas, covering all the different aspects of Dhamma, but especially about the five aggregates, the Four Noble Truths, karma, rebirth, the practice of meditation, but using the quotations from suttas, with many of which I've already been using, in the class, but because you only get a good understanding of the Dhamma or what the Buddha really taught when you read the suttas, because you can see how many times he emphasized certain suttas, certain topics in which he might have glossed over or mentioned once or twice, in others that he mentioned, hundreds, thousands of times to show their importance. But anyway, so I wrote this book called The Way to Peace and Happiness. It's about basically the format of the Four Noble Truths in the Eightfold Path. But a lot of those little short paragraphs, about similes and short stories about illustrating those aspects of Dhamma. Because I got the most profound joy and insights from, reading the suttas like that. That's why I like to, do the sutta study to refresh for my own refreshing, and to share that with others, because not everyone has access to that. So as I mentioned at the beginning, if I'm going to keep this Dhamma talks fairly short now, because I would prefer to entertain Dhamma questions from that people have. So I'm going to finish this talk now, and as I mentioned at the beginning, if you have some question, try to write them down on the chats, and then I'll try to answer them. And also in the following weeks, also I'll be starting out with a short talk, but then encouraging more questions about that. So if anything came to mind, you can write that down on the chat as I'm tending to these first few questions. Says, can you give that talk again if it's not too much to ask? I don't know which talk you're referring to, if it's today's talk or the one on Wednesday night that wasn't recorded, if you can let me know that. This other question, can we have something like collective karma? Is there something like collective karma? You could say yes and no, but in terms of what we call collective karma, it's the collective karma of being a human being. And so, we have certain karmic traits that got us to be born as a human being. But once we're a human being, then even amongst human beings, everybody's an individual. So, the karma that got you born as a human being is probably that, you had some good qualities, and, you didn't do so much horrible bad karma in the past that would prevent you from getting a human birth. So at least you made it as a human being. But so there's certain collective karma, you might say, or evolution of our consciousness that would allow you to get a human birth. But then you have your individual actions that you have done in the past that make you different from everybody else. Now, there's a lot of talk about, everybody's created equal, but from the Dhamma point of view, that's not entirely true. Potentially, yes, but it's the karma that distinguishes people. And there's a sutta I may cover in one of the classes called the Karma Vibhanga, the analysis and exposition of karma, in which the Buddha talks about that. So the fact that you were born a human being, and let's say collective karma, that means people in a country get killed in a war, for example, or 200 people die in a plane crash. Is that their collective karma? Well, it's difficult to say exactly, but the collective karma was that you wanted to go on a plane trip. You had the desire to take a flight, right? So you went on the flight, and there's always a potential that plane's going to crash. Now, that might not be a concrete type of satisfactory answer to a lot of people. But then you hear examples like the World Trade Center, where somebody was supposed to have gone to work that morning, and then they wanted to go see their secret girlfriend or a boyfriend, and they told their other spouse that they were going to go to the World Trade Center to work. And then this person instead went to see somebody else, and then the World Trade Center collapsed and their spouse thought they were dead. And then finally they found out that person's got to explain why he wasn't in the World Trade Center, you know. So anyway, there's a lot of complex karma involved in all that. But as to why these decisions, in those examples where you decide at the last minute not to go somewhere, and then you discover that that place where you would have gone, you know, there was a catastrophe and people died and you were spared. So, you know, these occur all the time, and it's impossible to, unless you're a clairvoyant and you can recall all your past lives, you probably won't be able to understand exactly how that happened. So I would say, yes, there is, you could say there's collective karma that we knew. We got born as a human being, or you got born as an animal, certain collective kind of traits to get born as an animal or a deva or some of the other realms. Like when you get born in the formless realms, you have to have mastered formless jhana in order to be, so that's collective karma. You can't get there unless you've mastered the sphere of infinite space, consciousness, and so on. Or some of the other jhanic levels. So in that way, there is a kind of a collective karma, you might say. There's certain traits. This next question, as contact is happening constantly between all six senses and sense objects, does that mean that the process of rebirth is happening through multiple sense doors simultaneously? What is the best way to intervene so as to be more skillful in the ceasing cycle? Can you discuss this further? Well, that's also a little bit difficult to try to describe, although I've kind of hinted at that. But, you know, things are moving through the senses, what the Abhidhamma called 10 to the 24th power times in the blink of an eye. So that means millions and millions, or perhaps a billion sensory stimulations are passing through the nervous system, you know, in the blink of an eye. Because basically it's just as fast as electrons, or, you know, the speed of light is flowing at, you know, a great speed, right? So the mind and electrons are moving through the nervous system at a similar speed. So it looks like things are happening at the same time. Lots of things are coming through, but our attention, we won't notice them without that contact and the attention to it. That's why right now you're sitting here and there's millions of contacts going through your nervous system, but because you're focused on looking at your screen or hearing this talk or reacting and so on, you're limiting it. So everything else, it's still going on, but you don't notice it. So it's not like they're going on simultaneously, but they are for all intents and purposes. You know, it seems like you can hear and feel and see things going on simultaneously. So, but at that ultra high speed, to actually pay attention and to recognize something, that can only happen at one time. So, you know, we may never build up that speed of mindfulness to see that intense momentum. Now, I gave an analogy, I think, on one of these talks, maybe not, but I'll just repeat it, with an airplane propeller, right? So if you've flown in a propeller aircraft, when the plane is parked, it's got, you know, 4 or 5 spokes. And then as it's moving slowly to start up, it goes slowly, you can still see the spokes. But as it speeds up, the spokes disappear. And it's like you're just looking through the sky and there's nothing there. And there was an example of some person who came to visit a friend who had a private pilot's license. And this friend took them up for a spin in the airplane. Then they came back down. And then this pilot was going to take another person on a flight. And so this friend came out and they were standing there in front of the airplane, you know, just saying their goodbyes. And this girl turned around and walked right into the propeller that was still going around fast because she didn't see it. And it took off half of her head. Now, I know that sounds gruesome, and it is gruesome, but I just mentioned that to illustrate a point, that when you're seeing how that flow of impermanence going so quickly that the objects seem to disappear, and even the sense of self seems to disappear. And it's like you're no longer seeing subject and object, the mind and body, an individual object. So it's just sort of like suspended, like those propeller movements had vanished because it was rotating so fast. But our mind doesn't rotate so fast. It gets stuck by clinging and grasping. So we're only seeing the spokes, each spoke of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking, like that, clinging to those individual things. But when we speed up the rate of perception, where we no longer have time to try to stop one of those propellers, then that's when the sense of self and I disappears, just like the solidness of the propeller disappears. So it's very interesting. That's really Vipassana. And that's the skill in Vipassana, is learning how to trick the mind out of itself. Because we've been tricked into believing that the five aggregates are me and mine and real, and that's how we've become stuck to them. So that's really one of the best ways to train the mind in that. That's, observing impermanence. They train themselves as part of, again, the Satipatthana Sutta or Anapanasati Sutta. Breathing in, beholding impermanence, breathing out, beholding impermanence. That means he trains himself. So you're training yourself to try to see how quickly each of these moments arises and vanishes. And it's at that moment of contact feeling. The water in the jar analogy. Isn't the release of the water into the lake similar to the release of the mind to a universal consciousness, as Jung described? Isn't that considered a false view of the self? And would rebirth then just be recapturing the lake water? Don't read too much intellect, into these analogies. And, that's basically the difference between, let's say, a Buddhist understanding of Nibbana and the Vedantic or the Hindu yogic idea of the moksha, the release of the release of the ego. And these are very subtle and abstruse philosophical points. And I don't find a difficulty in that, and I don't see it that way. It's when you get stuck on words that the problem arises. But like I mentioned, the Buddhist nirvana is the deathless state. So, to me, okay, that's like the sky. Let's say the sky of the whole universe is like the deathless state without any objects in it. And when the mind goes into that, it's the Atman, you see, the self identity. That's his, or thinking that entity is some kind of a creating process. Now, again, the Buddha said, what I've taught you in the Dhamma is like the leaves in my hand, as opposed to all the leaves in the forest. So in his talk about no self, in teaching of no self, It was a skillful means to get you to let go of what the I is identifying with. That means form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness, which is creating that dualistic, maintaining that dualistic perception. And also, you know, people came to the Buddha, and, you know, these people who believed in the, you know, the supreme self or something. And so he accused the Buddha of being an annihilationist. And the Buddha, you teach annihilationism, you know, annihilate the ego. And the Buddha said, in one way, I'm annihilationist. That means I teach the annihilation of greed, hatred, and delusion. That's all. He didn't go beyond that. And whatever a person wants to deposit or intuit beyond that, that's their business. But the ceasing of the wheel of rebirth was, you know, the main focus of the Buddhist teaching in attaining Nibbana. The word Nibbana means the end of greed, hatred, and delusion. It didn't mean the end of anything else. It means the end of greed, hatred, and delusion. So when you reach that state, you'll know for yourself whether there is, again, you know, people are asking the Buddha, does the Buddha exist or not exist? Both exist, neither, and so on. And the Buddha kept saying no to all those things. But he did say Nibbana is, you know. So that's why it's very difficult to grasp. To me, just the difference between the Hindu version of whatever they believe in, cosmic consciousness or supreme self, and Nibbana, to me, it's just philosophical hair splitting. And so anyway, that's the way I see it. I don't want, you know, to make a big thing out of it. You know, go stage by stage. Once you get those stages of realization, you'll understand for yourself. Don't split hairs about it, and don't make it a burden. Keep it a burden. You know, the Buddha talked about the simile of the raft. Use this Dhamma to cross the ocean of samsara. When you get to the other side, leave the raft there. Don't put it on your head and go around trying to philosophically split hairs with other people arguing about certain points that most people are not going to understand. So the Buddha's teaching was about ending suffering and not some supreme philosophical statements. And some other schools of Buddhism may try to posit some philosophical absolutes and so on, but the Buddha was mainly interested in ending the suffering in a person's mind. And that process of creating karma and that moment-to-moment birth and death. And so, you know, don't be worried about, you know, what's left after that. Because when you reach that state, you'll understand everything. Okay. Could you, okay, this is an answer to the, I guess it was the Wednesday talk. I would say just go back and read the Sanyutta Nikaya Nibbana Vagga, because all those suttas that I covered on the July 8th sutta class are taken from the Samyutta Nikaya Nibbana Vagga. I can't pick out, tell all the individuals, just read the whole thing, it's worthwhile. And then you will have everything that we talked about that night. But I'm not going to go over and give the same, because even I couldn't, because, you know, even though I might give Dhamma talks on the same subject, it's not going to be the exact word for word every single thing that is said. Something will have changed. So it's like a person cannot step in the same river twice. You know, it'll still feel cold, and you might still feel the stones underneath, but the same water is not running past your legs. How do we deal with other family members performing a kusala karma? Allow it, advise against it, even if it causes friction? Well, yeah, that's a difficult one. Not everybody's going to be interested in Dhamma. And the fact that you all are interested in Dhamma, and how you became interested in Dhamma is probably different for every one of you out there. Some were born maybe in a Buddhist family, some others just casually heard about it in some way. But so not everybody's interested in the Dhamma. So if you try to tell other family members, about the morality and they shouldn't drink and they should, everyone knows they shouldn't, but the habits and the past karma that got them into these things, it's very difficult for people to change. And the people normally don't like to hear the truth, right? Truth hurts. So when people expose your faults, naturally the ordinary person rebels against it, because no one likes to be played the fool or made to look like a fool. Why can't you just stop drinking? Why can't you stop using bad language? Why can't you stop doing this and this and that? Yeah, but these habits run so deep in the sankharas that it's not easy. So we try to help another person as much as we can, but if they refuse to listen and consider things, then there's only so much that we can do. And one shouldn't break your back trying to save another person if they don't want to be saved. So you can do whatever you could do, but if it gets to the point that it's stressing you out so much that the other person is not listening, or you can't seem to help them, don't take it upon yourself to think that you have to do that. There was a story about the Buddha was living in a place called Savatthi, and outside the monastery there was a man who used to butcher pigs, and you could hear the sound of the pigs screaming and wailing, even while he was giving Dhamma talks. They hear the sound. And some people, asked the Buddha, why don't you go and save that person? Why don't you go and set him right? He says, some people in the world, they can't be saved. And you may not like to hear that, but karma is so profound that not everybody may not be able to be saved by the Dhamma. People think they should, but in reality, people are different in that sense. We do what we can. And but that person has their own karma to work out. You have your own karma to work out, and at some point you have to let go of it. And sometimes that's the way people learn, is by getting burnt so bad that finally something deep inside of them turns around. But we can try to do as much as we can. But if you come to that point where it's driving you, stressing you out and causing you more grief, then understand that everybody has their own karma to work out. And we come into the life with our own karma. We work through that karma on our own, and we pass on to the next life according to that karma too. Okay. Maybe just one more question here. When I practice mindfulness, sometimes I have the impression that it is a feeling of perception. Is that the I or doubt? No, the feeling, everything is a feeling and a perception. And consciousness arises. You can't separate consciousness from feeling and perception. Feeling and perception are mental activities of the mental formations. Consciousness is the knowing faculty, and they rise together. Now, the only thing we can do in mindfulness is we're not preventing, you can't really prevent feeling and perception until you've reached the formless jhanic levels, which most people probably have not. But in our ordinary practice, feeling and perception, but it's the arising of craving that where we have to be alert and even craving, the initial craving, you won't be able to stop right away. But it's that link between when craving turns into grasping, that's really where the practice of mindfulness plays its important part, to slow down that grasping of the mind so that when it comes point of making a decision and then making the action, we'll have time to make the wise decision not to do the negative action or to do the wholesome action. Really, right there is where the whole practice of Dhamma lies in terms of transforming our karma. And of course, the feeling of I is going to arise with feeling and perception because that's ignorance. And until you're an arahant, the feeling of I will come up. So it's not doubt, it's a reality. That's just the nature of ignorance. And that feeling of I is going to be there with all the feelings and perceptions and consciousness. You can't really separate them until, like the ninth jhana or something. So, or the eighth jhana, the formless jhana of neither perception nor non-perception. It gets so rarefied, but you're not going to attain that anytime soon, I don't think. So, and the Buddha said that even when attaining jhanas and those higher states of meditation, he doesn't have the feeling that I'm attaining this state or that I am coming out of the state, because that sense of I would have gotten very, very weak, but not totally overcome. But only in the state of jhana or the deep insight that feeling of I, fades away. Okay, well, friends, I think I'm going to stop there. If I didn't answer your question, why don't you save those for another time, because I don't want it to go on too long. Because we still want to have our meditation practice. So the people that are, watching in from Europe and so on, it's already like, late at night for them. Okay, so those are good questions. And, again, if I didn't answer them this time, you can keep them for next week, Sunday's program. And okay. So we're going to take a short break and come back in a few minutes to do a few stretches and then have our meditation. Is everybody still there? I just wanted to, before we start the yoga, just to mention something about one of those, about the question about the sutta class last Wednesday. So those suttas, because it was not recorded. Now, almost all of those suttas that I went over last Wednesday are in that book that I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, The Way to Peace and Happiness. Some of you may have that, but that book is a book that I put together on the Dhamma, back in 1977 or so. And all those suttas that I mentioned on Wednesday are in that book. Now, that book is on my blog that you can download. It's called The Way to Peace and Happiness. If you don't have the other Sanyutta Nikaya, actually I'm going to read from this book next Wednesday too, the same book, some other aspects about Nibbana in that. So anyway, the person who had the question or anybody else missed the talk, I'm going to put the link to that book, or Prashant, maybe you can find it. It's on my blog, you know, the Way to Peace and Happiness under the books, on the books page. If you go to my blog, bhanterahula.blogspot.com.
Yes, I found it.
And then click the bar called books, and then scroll down till you see the Way to Peace and Happiness. You can download that book for free, and then you can find the section, read through that, and find the section on the Paticca Samuppada, or I can't pinpoint the pages right now, but anyway, it's there. So
I just posted the link in the chat.
Okay, we'll go ahead and then do some few stretches. So just feel your feet pressing the floor. Relax your shoulders and arms at the sides. Begin some deep, slow breathing. After breathing in, hold the air in your lungs for 2 or 3 seconds. Return to this starting point, or on the out breath, just relaxing the body and mind in the present moment. We coordinate these movements with that same deep, slow breathing. The whole time, just keep the attention focused in the body, feeling the inner sensations or any sensations on or in the body. So on the next in-breath, raise the arms over the head, interlock the fingers, turn the palms up, straighten the arms, stretch your head back, and stretch upwards at the same time. Feel the sensation. On the out breath, turn the palms down, touch the top of the head. And again, in breath, palms up, straighten the arms, head back. Out breath, touch the top of the head. Once more, in breath. Release the fingers, the out breath, arms back to the sides. Just relax, close the eyes. Just feel the feet pressing the floor. Feel the increased body sensations, pulsation. If you can't feel that, just feel where the clothing touches the skin on different places. And just remember standing, standing, standing. Present moment awareness. Just letting go of your thoughts. Just let the thoughts come and go in the back of the mind. Keep the feeling of the body in the front of the awareness. Okay, then next on the next in breath, push up on your toes and raise the arms over the head like this, facing the palms toward each other, keeping them 6 inches apart, and stretch upwards. Out breath, come back down, arms to the side, heels back to the floor. Use the breathing to help lift and lower the body, like blowing up a helium balloon. The in-breath, the body rises up on the toes, stretch. Out. Once more, in. Stretch. Hold it longer. Out. Relax. Again, close the eyes. Try to feel the subtle pulsations, sensations in your fingers. You might feel increased heart beating. So many different sensations coming and going. Okay, next we'll do side bending using one arm at a time. So on the in-breath, raise your left arm up. Try to keep the fingers and the arm straight, close to your head. On the out-breath, bend over your right side. Kind of let the arm kind of lay on the side of the head. In-breath, lift up. And 2 more times, same side, out-breath. Try to keep the arm straight. Don't let the elbow bend like that. Keep straight. In-breath, lift up. Third time, out-breath. In-breath. Now the out-breath, lower that arm. Next in-breath, raise the other arm. Out-breath, bend over the left side. In. Out. In. Out. In. The out-breath, lower the arm. Just relax. Just keep feeling all the sensations. Okay, one more exercise, the head turning from right to left. On an in-breath, turn the head to the right as far as you comfortably can. Try to look over the right shoulder. Try to focus your attention on some spot. On the out breath, turning 180 degrees back to the left. Look over the left shoulder. Just concentrate into the neck vertebrae, feeling or imagining them loosening up. Again, in-breath back to the right. Just imagine them riding on a cushion of oil, like in-breath is like squirting oil, oxygenated blood between the vertebrae. Out breath back to the right. In breath to the right. Out breath left. On the next in breath, let the head stop in the center. Try to feel the whole standing body. Try to feel that increased aliveness throughout the whole body. So many different sensations coming and going very quickly. It may feel like many sensations are happening at the same time, but it's just because our perception is slow. Okay, now come back to your seat. So I'm going to turn off the video so you can keep your attention focused on your own body and mind. And just get comfortable on your seat. Just place your hands somewhere. They're one on top of the other in your lap or resting on your legs. But once you place your hands somewhere, make the determination not to move them during the whole meditation practice. Start to keep your spine and head in a straight line. And first of all, just feel the weight of the body pressing the seat. And gently close the eyes and kind of peer down through the body to feel where the buttocks and feet press the floor. You just feel that contact of the earth element. The feeling of hardness is the earth vibration. Try to feel some different sensations or the buttocks or feet or legs. that contact producing the sensation, feeling. And let the awareness rise up to feel your hands and fingers. Having done the yoga exercise, you should be able to easily feel the subtle vibrations, pulsations in your fingers, thumbs, palm. Where one hand touched the other, where the hand touched the leg, that contact. Feel that contact, how many different little sensations arising from that contact. To see how many different sensations you can notice. 4, 5, 6 or more. And to feel the weight of your arms hanging from the shoulders. Relax the shoulders. Feel that sensation in the arms, the lower arm, the upper arm, where the clothing rubs against the skin of the arms, or shoulders that contact, producing sensations. The contact and the feeling and the consciousness, they're all there together. Or if you hear something in your room, it's the ear contact. Then feel your head balanced on top of the neck. You keep the chin lifted up level to the ground, parallel to the floor. Or to find the center of gravity as you move the whole head and spine backwards a little bit until you start to feel that backwards tipping point. Then stop. It should be the center of gravity where the body could either tip forwards or backwards. Try to hold that straight posture. You might also imagine that you are balancing a tall stack of books on top of the head. So you keep the chin lifted up level. And then just try to mentally feel that outline of the whole sitting body. Especially feel your face, some sensations on your face. The skin stretched over the face, little prickling sensations. Feel where your lips are touching together. That contact of the upper lip to the lower lip, producing sensation, feeling, perception, and consciousness, all there at once. And in the next moment, you might feel the tongue laying in the mouth. Contact of the tongue laying on the, touching the teeth or gums. And take a few deep, slow breaths Try to feel the flow of air through the nostrils. And expand the chest. You might even hear the sound of air going through the nostrils. Hold the air in for a few seconds and slowly breathe out just to feel all those different sensations. On the out breath, just try to feel the mind and body relaxing more into the present moment. This contracting sensation. Now feel the eyes resting in the sockets and the eyelids stretched over the eyeball. You might see some color or patterns behind the eyes. If there's any eye twitching movements, just consciously relax the eyes. And from that point behind the eyes, it should be easy to kind of feel the outline of the whole body. Let the awareness kind of expand slightly to feel that sense of the head, the hands in the middle, and the feet down below, the outline of the body. There you have the mind and body. Try to hold that feeling of the outline of the body. It's a perception also. And on this body, there's the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the skin, the relay points between the outer world and the inner world. Those points of contact where the world arises. See if you can kind of get a sense of that. Right there, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, they're all close together. And the skin. So you can notice contacts from all those senses. Maybe sounds are heard, sounds of this voice, or any other sounds in your room. Just try to keep the mind focused on that. This mind and body, the six senses, contact, the feelings arising. And any thoughts arising from those perceptions or feelings. If you like, you can do some deep, slow breathing to help keep the mind grounded in the body, even while you're observing. Just breathing in, feeling the whole body. Breathing out, feeling the whole body. Breathing in a long breath, one nose, breathing in a long breath. Breathing out a long breath, one nose, breathing out a long breath. Breathing in, feeling the whole breath body and the pause. The out breath, feeling the whole breath body with the pause. Just closing all the loopholes in the mind. Following the whole in-breath with undivided attention. And feel that brief pause. And feeling the whole out-breath with undivided attention. And the brief pause. And we'll add counting the breaths from 1 to 10 with this to try to develop a more precise concentration. So with the next expanding in breath, count 1. Feeling the pause. And with the contracting out breath, so count 1. Riding the out breath down to the in to feel the pause. With the next in breath, count 2. The out breath, 2. Next in breath, 3. Out breath, 3. In breath, 4. Out breath, 4. In breath, 5. Out breath, 5. In breath, 6. Out breath, 6. In breath, 7. Out breath 7. In breath 8. Out breath 8. In breath 9. Out breath 9. In breath 10. Out breath 10. Discontinue the counting. Discontinue any controlled deep breathing. Let the breathing return to its uncontrolled rhythm, shorter rhythm, but continue to feel it. Just keeping the attention focused there in the middle of the body. Feel the subtler expanding and contracting sensation. It's like turning up the power of the mental microscope. Just try to feel those touch sensations of the clothing against the belly, or rib cage, or chest. All those different expanding contacts, contracting contacts. When breathing in a shorter breath, know that the breath is short. Breathing out a shorter breath, knowing the breath is short. Try to notice how each breath is different. Sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. Contacts are different. With each breath, feel different sensations, expanding or contracting. The ability to notice that is very deep, keen mindfulness. Feeling the brief pauses between the breaths. In sitting, out, sitting. And with each out breath, just allowing the body and mind to relax more and more into the present moment. Breathing in, tranquilizing the body and mind. One trains oneself. Breathing out, tranquilizing the body and mind. Just feeling that inward stillness gradually evolving. But at the same time, be alert for thoughts trying to urge, to well up thoughts or urges. Just notice thoughts as just thinking. They just arise, last a moment, vanish to the back of the mind. Keep that stillness of the breathing body in the front of the awareness. Just feel the subtle sensations of the body around the breath. Breathing is there in the middle, but around it you can feel subtle vibrations, sensations, maybe even some aches or pains. And is cultivating this investigation of Dhamma, the enlightenment factor, knowing this mind and body is there with the senses, sense organs, producing contact, sensations and feelings arise, perception. Just with each ingoing and outgoing breath, so many sensations, contact sensations, perceptions, consciousness arising, vanishing. So be alert for any desire or aversion arising. For any grasping, the mind thinking, planning or scheming something, worrying about something. Any of the hindrances. If you actually make some movement and understand that as the becoming, if you move the body, itch or get rid of a painful feeling, it's the volitional formation, the becoming, and then the ego getting stronger. Oh, I got rid of the itch, I got rid of the pain. Or I thought about something, the rebirth of the I, moment to moment. Try to study that process. Breath by breath, moment by moment. Just allow the rate of perception to build up speed, different sensations, feelings, perception, arising and vanishing, arising and vanishing. Just let the awareness kind of expand and notice more and more sensations all over the body, sounds, urges or thoughts, just coming and going. Not giving the attention time to cling. Break the chain between feeling and craving, or craving and grasping. That's where you slow down the wheel. Critical links between feeling, craving, grasping, becoming. From time to time, take a few deep, slow breaths. Reground the attention in the body. Charge up the bloodstream with oxygenated blood. If you're feeling drowsy or sluggish or too many thoughts. Be aware of that little sense of I, the idea or feeling of I, me, or mine. It's there in the back of the awareness, the subtle ego. Even if you reach a deep level of tranquility, that subtle thought of I still lingers in the subtle levels of consciousness. Just allow that subtle sense of I or me also to just fade away. Just with each out breath, just kind of feeling that last subtle little trace of I or me kind of fading away like a dewdrop dissolving in the morning sunshine. Just even try to kind of think or imagine what that deathless vibration could be. The gaps between birth and death of the ego consciousness. Apamado amata padam pamado machuno padam appamadena miyanti ye pamatayata mata etam visesato nyatava appamadam hi pandita appamade pamudanti Ariyanam Gochari Ratam. Mindfulness is the path to the deathless. Unmindfulness is the path to death. The mindful do not die. The unmindful are as if dead already. So understanding this excellence of mindfulness, the wise person dwells therein, enjoying the bliss beyond birth and death, even in this life. And thus spoke the Buddha. Now, friends, just begin taking a few more deep, slow breaths. We'll just send out sort of metta radiations to ourselves and all beings. If you can, take a deep, slow breath, hold the air in the lungs for as long as you comfortably can, and just imagine those subtle vibrations like the metta permeating your whole body and going outwards in the environment. And on the out breath, just feel that relaxation of the body and mind. Just take several deep breaths like that, sending metta to your own body and mind. On the in breath and on the out breath, just imagine the out breath vibrations radiating outward across the hills, valleys, towns, cities, countries, across the ocean. Just with each out breath, just radiating those vibrations of pure wisdom, pure love, pure energy, metta. Just imagining it permeating the bodies and minds of all the beings, with the idea that may all living beings be well, peaceful, and wise. May all living beings be free from sufferings of body and mind created by their unskillful thought, speech, and action. May all beings have patience, strength, mindfulness, and wisdom to meet and overcome all difficulties in life. May all beings be able to hear the profound teachings of the Dhamma, to learn and practice meditation, to help free their minds from some suffering and confusion. May all beings be well, peaceful, and wise. May all beings be well, peaceful, and wise. It's like a mantra reverberating throughout space. Well, peaceful, and wise. And now to finish, if you'd like to join in chanting the sadhu 3 times slowly, we do that with the breathing. So take a deep in-breath, and on the out-breath, make the long chanting. Sadhu. 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 And place your hands at the edge of your knees. And on the next in-breath, stretch the head back and arch your lower spine, pulling the hands against the knees. Help arch backwards more. Hold it a few moments. Feel the sensation. And lift the head up, and on an out breath, press the chin to the top of the chest to stretch the neck vertebrae. Lift the chin up level on an in-breath. Relax on the out-breath. Okay, friends. I hope that at least some of you could follow that, meditation to kind of train the mind in that direction of understanding the moment-to-moment birth and death. So, as I mentioned earlier, I think Prashant had put up the link to the little book, The Way to Peace and Happiness, that you can find on my blog. And you just have to look through that toward the middle or into the book to the section which is dealing with like karma and rebirth process. And that's what I'm going to be reading, some of those short excerpts from different suttas on the Wednesday night. And you can find from the previous Wednesday, look in the section also of the dependent origination, and you'll be able to see those suttas that I went over last week also. Okay, friends? So, wish you all the best during this next week. And mindfulness a day keeps dukkha away. So,
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
you're all very welcome.
Thank you very much.
How many of you out there, you've been listening now to these talks and these meditations for the last couple